Welcome to Peace Conversations and Ministry of Peace Community of Faith, a congregation of the United Methodist Church. Our topic for this session is the heart of Christianity in changing times, based on a book by Marcus Borg. I'm going to open it up for general conversation and see what people may have to say. So any thoughts on this portion here from anybody?
I hadn't read Borg before, but I heard him. Like probably when this came out, there was a series on NPR where he was doing talks and then doing Q&A after the talks, and so I'd pretty familiar with him from that because I think he was on a dozen different times, or probably going through different discussions, different talks.
Okay.
But I like a lot of what he says, and tries to get to the heart. Like we talked before. I grew up. I was taught the storybook Christianity, which I realized pretty soon wasn't accurate, and went back and read the Bible for myself, and I got more out of it closer to what Borg talks about than what I was taught. So it's nice to hear somebody that's going through it and realizing there's a lot of people that go through the Bible and read it and try to make sense out of it rather than follow what they're taught. Like I was taught, don't you try to interpret it. We'll tell you what it means. And,
that traditional paradigm that he talks about.
Right, and that's heavy what I was taught, and when I read it for myself, I got more what he just describes in his book here, and that makes more sense and makes it more enjoyable. It's a lot deeper.
You got my shark tail cat here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Lisa, have you read Marcus Borg before, or have you read this book?
Not this book. I think I had another one. I can't remember which one, but the talking about the earlier paradigm was and the origins is not that much older than the emerging paradigm. So yeah, but he laid it out very well in kind of the main differences of where the conflicts are: the ordination of women, gays and lesbians, Christian exclusivism.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought that was well done.
Yeah.
And
good.
Yeah. One part of it I like is something we've talked about in several of our sessions, whether it's this or Tuesday night session, is kind of the history on the Bible, how when it was put together, by whom, for whom, which gives some context to the reading, and like you mentioned here, is a lot of the so-called traditional beliefs that people think go back to Jesus were only 100 or 200 years old. A lot of the paradigms that people think of today are very new. They're 1800s, 1900s. They're just not very old. And a few go back a few hundred years more than that, but still 1600 is a long, long ways from the time of Jesus. And so kind of knowing where they came from and why some of these things emerged, you kind of shake your head on why they took off, or all I think of as control, but to be able to let them go to go back and try to put together what was being said and why is something I enjoy doing.
So let's go to Sharon. Sharon, is there anything you want to share about have you read Borg before, or have you read this book?
Yes, actually, I've read Borg before, and I've read this book, but I've read this book a couple of times. And when I read it, I always get something new out of it, or many things new out of it. So I'm thrilled to be reading it again. What's interesting to me is Chuck when you say you read the Bible on your own and could figure out truths that would apply to you and your life, when I read the Bible as a kid and growing up, because I grew up in a very conservative church and family, I took the Bible literally word for word and then struggled with it because, you know, I wasn't doing exactly what the laws said, for instance, in the Old Testament. And so over the time I've been at peace, and I'm thrilled with my new learning, in that when I look at the Bible and we talk about the Bible as in a historical, metaphorical way, indeed, it's so much deeper and more meaningful, and it seems to me more logical and has more truth in it. And I just appreciate that so much.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I like the idea of as we evolve, how we rethink the Bible and its meanings based on all the other resources we have that, in addition to the Bible and Borg and other things, make a very meaningful way of being.
Yeah.
So Sharon, it sounds like you could say you grew up in that traditional or earlier paradigm that Borg was talking about in your church. Is that fairly true when you were younger?
Yes.
Mhm.
We were concerned. Well, we were concerned, of course, with memorization and getting the answers right.
Mhm.
And it had nothing, unless I totally missed the point, it had nothing to do with how to live our lives on a daily basis, in terms of looking at Christ as a role model and saying, this is how we should live. And Gary, you've used the term social justice many times in the past,
Mhm.
and economic justice. And no, we never heard about social justice, for example,
Sure.
or economic justice.
So Lisa, how about you? Do you feel like you grew up in that earlier or traditional paradigm church?
Somewhat, not as not as much as Sharon and Chuck, but
Okay.
yes.
Mm-hmm. The church I grew up to was also earlier traditional paradigm, maybe a soft version. He talked about the hard version, the
Right.
soft version.
Yeah, mine would have been a softer version.
Yeah, but I do remember, and this came to mind as Sharon was talking, you know, for confirmation, it was all about memorizing the correct answer I grew up Lutheran, from Luther's catechism. You know, that may ring a bell for some of us who went through catechism, whether it be in a Lutheran church, United Methodist, or whatever. So that's kind of a good overview introduction. Any observations or any one of the areas that anybody wants to kind of dig into or have thoughts about? Any thoughts or questions spinning around in your heads?
Yeah, well, we just did, the preface and the first chapter, and the first
Mhm.
chapter is separate from the other chapters in that I think it's an introduction to set the ground, to set the environment. So I think probably more of the detailed discussion might come up in other chapters, because
Mhm.
this one is just kind of laying the groundwork for what's to come, and in that regard, it's just, you know, it has you looking forward to the next chapters,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I also think Borg explains even in the preface that we are going to be in the book looking at things differently, and that, I don't know, in today's world, it just makes sense to me. Yeah.
One
It
of the
just
things that,
fits so well with how we should be living today.
Well, Lisa, were you gonna?
I was just reminding myself when this came out. I think it came out in 2003, so it's 18 years ago.
Yes.
And so even in the last 18 years, a lot of things have changed.
A lot of things have changed. He makes reference a couple times to 40 years ago, which now is about 60 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Which resonates with me.
Yeah.
right,
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's even more relevant now than it was in 2003 when it first came out, of some of the things. And obviously there's more tensions that it creates more tension, right?
Sure.
So, but you know, that's part of life and how we grow, though. If things aren't confronted, then you're not going to change.
Yeah, one thing I noticed he's pretty good at is, you know, when I read things, I'm kind of looking for my own direction, my own path in life, trying to understand, you know, find ways to see and to look at things different, and to try to find truth in things. Where when he's writing about it, he's very much church-minded, and so he is trying to address all these different types of views, and he does a pretty good job of trying to go through stuff, but some of that is just an aside from where I go, because like I say, I'm looking at my path, but he's looking at leading other people in the path, so he's trying to address a whole host of different types of thought, and he's pretty careful about it. So you know, he does a good job, and I remember hearing that from his talks and stuff. And it was probably, like I say, when this came out, it might have been 18 years ago. It feels like just a couple, but you know, they all meld together after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's very careful about trying to address and make sure he's including a lot of different ways that people look at this material.
Yeah. So he talks about us being in a never-ending conversation. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that seems appropriate, but possibly over the last 18 years, do you think that conversation has become more harmonious or more divisive?
Well, nothing's become harmonious in the last years here.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I would think he would hope that, you know, we could engage in a conversation without being divisive, but possibly it has not been like that over the last 18 years. I've talked to a number of people. Even it's hard to engage in this conversation with family members, extended family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of the things that he talks about in there, you know, is that you got the different paradigms, the way people look at stuff. And he says, you know, it's okay for people to see things one way, and if it works for them, that's fine. When I look at that, it's kind of like saying it's okay for people to see that the Earth is flat or is the center of the universe. But you know, when you're in that mindset, you're really not going to have open discourse about what might be, because the new paradigm doesn't claim to have answers; it wants to have a discussion. And the old paradigms wants to have all the answers. You know, it's all facts. It's all this. This is what I believe. This is what it is. Where the new paradigm, it's more about looking at it, discussing it, trying to find paths through it. And from my understanding, the people that around Jesus' time, especially that followed him after his death, a lot of times would just have discussions of the same nature. And they would get together and different people would lead. There wasn't a leader like now, there's a pastor or somebody that's always kind of at the center. But they would get together and take turns so that the focus could change and discuss different things that Jesus taught and different ways of seeing the world, because they're trying to formulate this stuff. And I see that as more, the new paradigm is being more open to discussion, trying to formulate a way to see things. Each point in your life, you're going to see it a little different. And rather than saying, this is what is, memorize this, you're all good, go have a party afterwards. If you've got this memorized and say, I believe, you're good. And
that's kind of a good way to put it. The earlier paradigm of knowing what is right to believe,
right,
in order so you can get to the party in heaven afterwards.
Right.
For Marcus Borg, it seemed the new paradigm is more about exploring faith, and he talks about that relational dynamic, the sacramental relational aspect of faith, connecting us up with the sacred. Did that echo well for any of you, that different sense of moving forward with the new paradigm? He gave like historical, metaphorical, sacramental, relational. He had 5 adjectives, I believe. I can't remember.
Right, that he's going to discuss later as he goes through the book. Yeah.
But that is kind of basically setting up the foundation here.
Right.
Yeah.
But the one thing about is saying, well, it's okay to believe this or that. I think that's like saying it's okay for the kids in school to say 2 and 2 is 5. Well, they really should understand how the numbers work and learn the math. And I think that's the same with learning spirit. There's no facts, there's no hard facts, but when you're holding hard facts, especially ones that have kind of been forced on over just the last few hundred years, and people have taken some of the church thoughts off into a very cultish way. I don't think that's healthy I don't think it's healthy to have a group of people following that, because it does make the divisions, the idea that the Christendom is the only way. It reminds me of Christian Taliban. This is the only way, and we're going to do it this way, or we're going to put some consequences on you. And I think that is very antithetical to the teachings of Jesus. And I don't think that necessarily is a good way to think or to be, because I think it's dangerous. And that's where the religious wars come from. And I don't think that's a healthy thing.
I also think that in my case, because I grew up with heaven or hell, and I suspect a lot of kids did, and perhaps still do, the idea that if you don't get it right, you will go to hell is such a strong fear that it's impossible to have a discussion about it, because if you get the answer wrong, you will go to hell. So there's such fear, and I'm talking, personally, in opening up to any other way of seeing the Bible or Christ, that it's impossible to go any further. I also think that because in our society, you are taught to be right, you are taught to be correct. In school, for instance, in a test, you want the correct answers. I do not know this, but I suspect there are very few classes where it's let's explore this idea, and discuss it. What schools, I think, look for is on a test is let's get the answer right. So it's our children do not learn to be open about discussing things, listen to other people's ideas, and you don't necessarily have to believe them, but the idea of being respectful and open enough to listen to somebody else's ideas and even to say, tell me more about what you think. I'm interested. I might not agree with you, but I'd like to hear your side of the story too. That's not taught. That idea, I don't think is taught very well. Well, maybe in the world. So definitely in our schools.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right, that our school situation is not a traditionally a place where you have that kind of open conversation. That's not that I've experienced anyway.
No.
Well,
In the schools I went to, where it was religious school, one of my first 9 years, there was no open discussion. There was no open discussion, period. It was all about this is the facts. This is what you believe. Repeat it over and over and over, and I, like I say, I remember the first time I missed church or missed mass on Sunday when I was growing up and decided I was going a different direction. Yeah, there was a bit of terror there. It was like letting go of the plane the first time skydiving. It's like, okay, is everything going to open? And because you're taught that missing, Sunday mass attendance was missing it was a mortal sin. It means you got that black mark. You're going to hell. And
so Chuck, were you afraid not to?
Oh yeah, there was some trepidation, wondering, when lightning was going to strike, and got through the day and everything was pretty good. It's like, phew. I mean, because it was drilled in, it was pounded in with big sticks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it was, and so yeah, you kind of always wondered, I says, I don't believe this is right, but you're looking over your shoulder, saying,
So Chuck, it sounds like you went to a school connected up with your church.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It was literally connected.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go outside.
Physically. Mine was too. And,
Yeah.
and it sounds like yours, they're talking about kind of the hard version. You received a hard version.
Yeah, a diamond. It was.
Yeah, and mine was kind of a softer version of the older paradigm, or the earlier paradigm, as he talks about it.
Yeah.
But I think it was the same.
Right.
For me, I think of my mother and grandmother who lived within what he calls the earlier paradigm, but did it in a loving and caring way rather than in a way that is harmful and offers, comes out of fear,
Right.
kind of thing. So, it's when I think of at least, traditional and what I call progressive, I like to think of my grandma and my mom,
Right.
who are part of that, but nurtured and cared for me and loved me, even in that traditional way, where there were others who have been very harmful
Right.
in my life.
Right.
And so there's that balance. It's a whole lot easier to talk to people if you care about each other.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter
Right.
what paradigm you come out of.
Right. But like from our discussions and our Tuesday night discussions, putting the words that were translated into our Bible into context, where the word that they use that gets translated as hell is really the trash heap where somebody with no means at all might be trying to scrap and eke out a living, you know, like the kids in Tijuana, you see, you know, just trying to find whatever they can do to keep alive, right? That being relegated to what they translated as hell was not some magical place. It was just you were kind of outcast from society, and that's where you might be trying to find some scraps of nourishment. And heaven is really the cosmos, or everything outside of, you know, what we see, and but still it exists, you know, the world. And from other readings, I remember one of the quotes is eternity, you know, is not something that comes later. Eternity is around you right now, and it's there for you, you know. Begin to embrace it because you're in it, and realizing that we're not working for something later. It's here and now is continuous. What happens after death is continuous. And even in this world, it's not a here and later kind of thing. It's both. And putting together, you know, just the interpretation of words. What is sin? You know, because sin is one of those things that's driven into you, and some is, you know, when they talk about sin there, it's just the term is missing the mark. So your focus is off, and repentance is getting your focus straightened around, changing your focus to see things differently, and very different than the big black mark that's going to stay with you and follow you around in somebody's book, or repentance, you know, the flogging yourself with branches kind of thing, you know. Are you with us, Gary?
I am. I just had to. I turned off my video and audio so I could cough without you having to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. So yes.
So anyway, just understanding those things, you know, those few things helps put a road for what are we talking about here, and when terms are used, that, you know, like Borg says, a lot of these concepts were put out in the last few hundred years, whether it's the 1600s, 1700s, 1900s. A lot of them are very, very recent. These were not early concepts. Yeah. The infallibility of the Bible and of the Pope and all that stuff, you know, all those things are fairly recent. I mean, the Pope one is less than 100 years. I think it was at 1930 or what was 1870 or 1930 was another one. I can't remember which.
You know, around 150 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. But
all that stuff is recent, you know, that you can just about reach back and you know, met people that were alive back then, you know, and
that is one of the interesting things. I think when we talk about the two different paradigms, we often think of the earlier paradigm as being around forever,
right?
And the emerging paradigm as being new, when in reality they're both new within the context of religion.
But the newer paradigm, I think, is closer to what was traditional.
Well, I think some of it, particularly maybe as we look at the Bible,
right?
But the whole idea of what Sharon had said earlier about social justice issues, ordination of women.
Yeah. Okay. All right, those things are new. Right.
LGBTQ, and how does Christianity interact with other world religions? Those are all very new, but opening up the Bible in a new way in the emerging is at least for me very interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So, but he does lay out kind of those four fundamental aspects at the heart of Christianity: faith, God, Jesus, and the Bible. And the idea is we're going to look at those in a brand new way moving forward. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of like what you saw from, you know, if you had read, you know, his first chapter here? That's what he set the foundation for moving forward.
Right. But yeah, setting up for later chapters. As I said, you know, a lot of us, he's kind of set the groundwork where he's coming from, and then we'll dive into different parts of it in more detail with different chapters.
Yeah. So for the next four chapters, I would guess those are, or the next four sessions, those are going to be the topics.
Yeah.
Each one of them moving ahead. You mentioned a little bit about, how we live that out in a new way, but he didn't touch much on that here. But that will be kind of the second portion of the sessions we'll have together.
Mhm.
That new way of living out our faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, on page 14, he says, to be a Christian does not mean believing in Christianity, but a relationship with God lived within the Christian tradition as a metaphor and sacrament of the sacred.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've mentioned before here is that I spent a few years over in Southeast Asia, several years ago. And as I was growing up, I was 19, 20, 21 in that area. And I realized that some of the people that I knew were the best Christians that I'd ever met. And they all called themselves Buddhists because they lived, what they were living was basically what Jesus taught. And where you go, they were very open people, open to different things, and open to discussion and trying to explore. And very, very giving, reaching out in every way to help strangers, friends, whoever. But very different than, when I came home. Oh my gosh, that's when the world was so divided and very judgmental. And if you're different, you're getting, you're going to be treated differently. Where these people just looked at everybody as moving spirits. They were just saw the wholeness in everybody and reacted with it and talked with it and discussed it, and were open in discussions, and it was wonderful. I got to think that was a normal thing, and it was for them, but not here.
Well, and I like what you said with the sense, you could see a Buddhist person and affirm their Buddhist faith, but yet at the same time see Christ in who they are.
And that's exactly what Jesus was teaching. So they were basically following and living the life that Jesus taught. Doesn't mean that they knew him, and it's about the teachings. And so many times now it's about worshiping the person, and they throw away the teachings. If they're listening to what he said and what he taught, people wouldn't be acting the way they are. And so that's why I say that they were living a Christian life. It just wasn't in the Christian rituals, but it was the life that Jesus taught. And that's where I felt the people from different religions that I'd met in different places there, whether they're Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, many of them were in that exploration and open about it and open to discuss it and never judgmental. And I just think that's the way it should be. And those are, like Borg saying, different faiths you work with, and it's the objective and all of the origins of these faiths is the same. And the paths are really the same. It's just the trimmings and the voices that are different.
I read a book once, and the title was, I believe, something like, without Buddha, I could not be a Christian.
Right.
And that's why I hear you saying it was much more the love and care you received from the Buddhist friends you made that helped your faith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Without you needing to say, I need to convert them to Christianity, which is the earlier paradigm or the traditional paradigm.
Yeah.
The traditional paradigm says you need to become Christian in order to have an authentic faith. And what I hear you saying is your authentic faith is helping my faith be more authentic as Chuck.
Right. Oh, yeah. I think when we put labels on it, we cheapen it. And it's an internal thing. It's a spiritual journey. And it's an internal thing that we all do. And when we start to put a label on it, I think we cheapen it. And that's why when I worked with a lot of these people, it was a very magic type experience. It was very spiritually uplifting. At the same time, it was just normal. You know, it was just the way things were. You'd never ever think about converting. We would just, you know, you might have discussions about teachings or something or about sayings, but sayings come from all over the place. And even you, like you say, when you're looking at the old Bible and the Proverbs and wisdom and stuff like that, those aren't from one group of people. Those are kind of general knowledge around all groups of people that were in that area, and probably beyond.
So, Sharon or Lisa, any thoughts spinning around in your heads? Well, I think Chuck and Lisa may have froze on us, Sharon. Sharon, are you still with me? Oh, I think maybe everybody froze on me.